Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome to part 2 of episode 24 of Chaos Under Heaven. That's right, there's a part 2. Woo! Sorry that I had to postpone this a little bit later. I had to take my dog on a walk, grab some fruit so that I could stay fed, stay energized, because I have now been at my computer desk for the last 3 hours. So, first and foremost, I meant to do this last time. Shout out to my Patreons at $15, Shaky Dog and Tank Artist Besadist at $8, Violets XD, and Chris Ross at $2. Your gratuity is greatly appreciated. Yeah, for those of you who are out of loop, I lowered my Patreon subscription costs. Yeah, I lowered the costs. And so I have a few interesting news articles. And by the way, if anyone here would be interested in seeing me react to any sort of news or current events, like if you have any articles you'd like me to read, or if you have any videos on YouTube you would like to watch me react to, then send it to me through the Discord. You can find my Discord down in the description below. I made sure to include the description. Unfortunately, Leftism Today will not be joining us, I'm afraid. Not this time. So I'm going to go ahead and go to YouTube, and I'm going to preface this by starting by saying that. I'm going to preface this by saying Leftism Today will not be joining us. He unfortunately cannot make it. I guess he double booked. I don't know, for whatever reason he's not here. So just throwing that out there. We're going to be doing this one without a co-host. But anyways, I have one thing to do that I'd like to do before we get started. Something that I like to bust out. I'm sure you guys are familiar with this. I have a bit of a kratom problem. I take kratom every day, and it's become something of a bad habit. So what I like to do is I like to dose a bit of kratom because it puts me in a good mindset, makes me feel all right. I used to have anxiety problems, and I used to take it not only for anxiety, but also because it helped kind of be like a supplement to my ADHD. Like I could notice I could sit down and I could like calmly focus on things for a greater duration of time when I was under the influence of kratom. The problem with kratom is it is addictive. Physically addictive. It is very similar to opiates in its method of action in the brain. So it's not a narcotic, but it kind of functions through the same receptors. So yeah, there's that. But anyways, I take it with orange juice because it tastes absolutely god awful, and the orange juice kills the flavor. So anywho. Yes, fellow ultra-left, fellow Gonzaloists. You know, I spoke to Victor in private a while ago, not too long ago, and he told me that he's actually pretty optimistic about China. Like, I don't think he's a full-fledged Dengist, but he does think that there's a lot of potential for China to have something resembling socialism within the next few decades. Take the Alex Jones super male vitality instead, implying that I don't already. I mean, I'm all about that super male vitality. You guys ever see that shit? Alex Jones, super male vitality before and after. Yeah, another announcement. I'm going to be transitioning from StreamYards to Streamlabs pretty soon. So let me go ahead and share my screen. By the way, guys, do me a favor and share this live stream with everyone you know. I'm trying to get these live streams more popular. And yeah, look at those incredible results, right? Before and after. This is before, 40 days later. Alex Jones is built like a tank, dude. Like, look at him. He's like a bullfrog. He's actually got some muscle on him. Like, if he were to diet and get lean, like, he'd look good. He's just overweight. But I mean, you can tell like he works out and he's kind of a gym rat. I mean, he's just a big husky guy. But anyways, enough about that. What do we have on the agenda list? No, not you. That's the script for my new video. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm gonna leave this up for a second. I don't mean to spoil any surprises, but I put some love into this. As you guys probably are aware, I'm making a response to Ubersoy, and this is going to be the thumbnail for my response video to his response video to Hakeem. And I feel like this is going to be a good thumbnail for it. So yeah, a little sneak peek, a little tidbit, little sneak peek, something you guys get to see. But yeah, I don't have any videos that I'm going to react to today, but once again, I'm going to resuscitate. If there's any videos on YouTube you guys would like to see me react to, send them to me before I stream, and I'll sift through them and I'll pick the best ones, and yeah, I'll react to them live. And same goes with news articles. If you have any news articles, anything you want to show me that you'd like to see me react to, I want you guys, I'm doing a little mass line tactic here. I'm relying on the mass line to relay the information that they'd like me to give feedback on. So anyways, this is a very accurate thumbnail of Ubersoy's response to Hakeem. But anyways, enough about Ubersoy. Anyways, let's see what we got here. Share. Oh yeah, that's right. On the agenda. So, starting off with NPR, Biden takes money out of COVID funding to beef up the police. Where are you? Here we go. So let me go ahead and dose real quick, and we'll get started. I stir the kratom, I stir it up, and a dose. Woo! Awful stuff. Homicide rates have been soaring, especially into big cities. So President Biden today announced a new plan for dealing with the increase. But there's a concern from a number of quarters about whether this is the right approach. His plan includes more money for the police departments and community programs. And it comes as the nation grapples with policing and as Congress continues to try and reach a deal on police reform. White House correspondent Franco Ordonez is here. Welcome back. Can you give us more details on what the president is proposing? Ordonez is like, yes. So there are a few measures he's announcing. Some are new, others are not. He said state and local governments could use some COVID-19 relief money to hire police officers and pay overtime. And some of that money can also go to community programs like job plans for teens and other programs that put vulnerable kids on a different track and away from violence. Another part of that plan involves cracking down on gun sellers. That's something Biden talked about today with Attorney General Merrick Garland. You know, they met up with a group of mayors and advocates to discuss the issue at the White House. And this is, I will say, becoming a major part of political issues for Mr. Biden, as NPR has reported. We're on pace to have the most violent year in decades. In May, there was about 28% increase in homicides in Philadelphia, 23% in New York, and Republicans are blaming Biden for the rise in crime rates in some of these cities. We're also talking about cities where there is very public protests over police misconduct or police brutality. How is the White House kind of balancing these concerns? Yeah, Congress has been working on a bill with reform since last summer when George Floyd was killed. Republican Senator Tim Scott has been negotiating with Democratic Representatives Karen Bass on this, and today Scott said they were hoping to work out the final language as soon as tomorrow. Now, a key part of Biden's plan to address the increase in crime involves more funding to the police, but there is concern among some progressives about that being a focus. And one of the people in today's meeting was Eddie Bocanegra. He leads a program in Chicago run by Heartland Alliance. You know he's pleased with the White House is taking a comprehensive approach to address gun violence, but he told me wants to make sure that alternatives to policing are part of the plan. So It's good to hear that yada yada yada. Well, there's a concern from one group that the right people are not being consulted. For instance, Mayor of Miami-Dade, yada yada. That's it. So, yeah, so the package includes money for state and local governments and gave them the latitude to spend some on policing where needed. The budgets of local governments were hit really hard during the shutdowns, as you know. But you'll also recall that some states and local governments also wanted to use this money for other things, such as including infrastructure. And the Biden administration said he said no to some of these requests. So there's been inconsistency here, at least in the messaging. So Biden's taken money out of COVID funding to give to the police to hire more cops, give them more resources over time, as though we don't give the police enough overtime and resources. What is it, like your average? I think Boone County sheriff makes like 90 grand a year. Like they like the police already make a lot of money, and well, he's doing this during the pandemic, which isn't completely over. I mean, we haven't achieved sufficient vaccination rates to truly crush the virus. We're still floating at around 70 million, 80 million people. I don't know, maybe that number is greater, but the main takeaway here is I don't have a problem. Personally, I don't really have a problem with him taking money out of COVID funding. What I have a problem with is taking that funding and directing it towards the police. See, that's the real red flag here. I gotta stop using that term because it's an anti-communist slogan originally, but you guys get the idea. Well, so that's what we're gonna see. Increased funding to the police. And some people that are Democratic partisans are gonna be like, oh, it's not that at all. No, it's just, give the police more resources so they can enforce the law because there's an increased crime rate. And they never let a good crisis go to waste because they always use things like this as a justification, like the January 6th Capitol Hill riot. They use these things as justifications to crack down on activists and protesters and, disproportionately left-wing activists and protesters. That's usually what it goes after. So in the next sheet, let's see, right here, whitehouse.gov. I'm going to read some excerpts from this. National Strategy for Countering Domestic Terrorism. So hear this, guys. In his first full day in office, President Biden directed his national security team to lead a 100-day comprehensive review of the U.S. government's efforts to address domestic terrorism, which has evolved into the most urgent terrorism threat in the United States faces today. As a result of the review, the Biden administration is releasing the first ever national strategy for countering domestic terrorism to address his challenge to America's national security and improve the federal government's response. Domestic terrorism is not a new threat in the United States, yet it is a threat Americans have endured too often in recent years. The comprehensive strategy provides a nationwide framework for the U.S. government and partners to understand and share domestic terrorism-related information, prevent domestic terrorism recruitment and mobilization to violence, disrupt and deter domestic terrorist activity, and confront long-term contributors to domestic terrorism. Let's see. Pillar 1. Understand the shared domestic terrorism-related information. The U.S. government will enhance domestic terrorism analysis and improve information sharing throughout law enforcement. At the federal, state, local, tribal, and territorial levels, and where appropriate, private sector partners, the Department of Justice and Federal Bureau of Investigation has implemented a robust system to methodologically track domestic terrorism cases nationwide. The Department of State, as well as intelligence and law enforcement, communities are learning more from foreign partners about the international dimensions of this threat. The Department of State will continue to assess whether additional foreign entities linked to domestic terrorism can be designated. Pillar 2. Prevent domestic terrorism recruitment and mobilization to violence. Drawing on the expertise of a variety of departments and agencies, the U.S. government has revamped support to community partners who can help prevent individuals from reaching the point of committing terrorist violence. Oh yeah, you mean like that entrapment shit that the FBI does where they'll like single out mentally ill teenagers and like peer pressure them into committing random acts of violence? Yeah, That's how. That's what the FBI does. That's how they. That's how they crack down on terrorism, and then they consider it a win. The U.S. government will strengthen domestic terrorism prevention resource services for the first time. The Department of Homeland Security has designated domestic violent extremism as a national priority area within the Department's Homeland Security, which means that over 77 million will be allocated to state, local, tribal, and territorial parts to prevent, protect against, and respond to domestic violence extremism. So, but what do they consider domestic violence extremism is the question. Well, we shall see. All right. The forked federal law enforcement as well as our state, local, tribal, yada, yada. The U.S. government will increase support federal, state, and local law enforcement in addressing domestic terrorism. Well, that includes over $100 million in additional resources to the FBI, DOJ, and DHS included in the presidential's fiscal year of 2022 budget to ensure the federal government has the analysis, investigators, and prosecutors. Okay, so what does this mean? What does all this mean? All right. Well, it means that all this extra money is going into the feds, police, to basically interrogate, investigate, spy on public activities. And in all honesty, this is going to be used to disproportionately crack down on left-wing protesters. Now, I'm looking for the provision in here, but basically it's lumping up white nationalists and neo-Nazis and basically putting them in the same camps as animal rights activists, climate activists, as well as, anarchists and socialists and so on. It's lumping it all together. So anything that's like outside, any politics that's outside of the realm of what is acceptable within the discourse of the status quo is basically suspect under this new provision, under this new national strategy. So, and of course, the J7 riot, the so-called insurrection. It wasn't an insurrection, it was a LARP. One big LARP, bunch of boomers broke into the Capitol building, took a bunch of selfies, and then they all went home. But of course, it's being used to justify further encroaching and encircling on people's civil rights and liberties because they're lumping it all together. And so black bagging, infiltration, the feds they're just going to continue to sink their grips on these organizations because, status quo isn't working for people. So people are looking for answers outside of the status quo. So, and it goes to show, does this really demonstrate America's strength if it really feels the need to continuously and endlessly beef up the police state like this? Is this really a testament to a nation's strength when it has to tighten its direct control on things constantly? It's very funny to me because we accuse Russia and China and, back when the Soviets were still around, back when Russia was still Soviet, and the Chinese, we accuse them of being these aggressive police states. China has 4 times as many people as we do. And in spite of that, they have half as many prisoners as we do. Well, at least they did until COVID happened and we released a shit ton of prisoners because, it's dumb to keep people jammed in overcrowded prisons during a pandemic. But even then, 1 million prisoners in China and their population of 1.4 billion versus the United States, where we have about 330 million people, roughly, give or take 2 million prisoners in our prison population. That's absolutely ridiculous, We live in a surveillance state where we're constantly being spied on. And I mean, yeah. And it's messed up because they're using a lot of this spy technology to monitor our consumption habits and activities. And this is the reason why, if you really want to achieve anonymity, getting a VPN is really only the first step. If you really want to achieve true anonymity, I highly recommend you guys get into Tails. I'm not sure how familiar you all are with Tails, but hi, Alex Jones. It's called the Tails operating system. So yeah, check this out. Tails, the Amnesiac Incogno Live system, is a security-focused Debian-based Linux distribution aimed at preserving privacy and anonymity. All its including and outgoing connections are forced to go through Tor, and any non-anonymous connections are blocked. The system is designed to be booted at a live DVD or USB and will receive no digital footprint on the machine unless explicitly told to do so. So you plug in this USB into your computer with its operating system. It's all encrypted. You plug it in, and then you go and you do your secret anonymous information on the web. And then let's say the federal government's breaking down your front door. The feds are breaking down your door. You got vital information, all right, that you're typing away at. All you got to do is instantly unplug that USB. Your computer will shut down. They won't be able to find anything on your computer. And the only person who knows how to log back on and go through Tails is you. So it's just a hidden file that they'll never be able to find. And I mean, I suppose they could torture you for the password to unlock it, but they will. Besides that, they would never, ever be able to find you. You would be able to achieve true anonymity, or the best anonymity that you could afford getting Tails, along with Nord. Because the issue with Nord and other VPNs is that if the federal government suspects you of being a terrorist, they're going to go to Nord and ask them to give over your ISP data, your internet data. All right. Do you trust Nord, the corporation, the company Nord, to protect your privacy, to respect your privacy and not hand over that information? Well, you shouldn't, because the feds are going to find ways to fuck with them. So it's either you or them, and they're going to pick you. So that's why Tails exists. Complete anonymity. Just not shilling for big tails, but it's a useful tool that I think you guys might come in handy if you are interested in true anonymity. Anyways, let's go ahead and move on. I got another article for you guys. Another article from Fox News, nonetheless. A Californian professor was widely hounded on Twitter for praising the legacy of Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin, calling him one of the greatest leaders of the 20th century. Fucking based. Asatar Bear is self-identified communist, is an economics professor at Riverside College City in South California. In multiple Twitter posts, Bear seemed to suggest that discussions on Stalin, who led the USSR between 24 and 53, had been lacking in nuance. Yes, they do. They are utterly lacking in nuance. It's such a basic surface level understanding where the narrative is just manipulated to demonize the Soviets as much as possible, purely on ideological grounds. We are just now, through the opening up of the Soviet archives and the dying down of the Cold War history, well, at least until recently, because they're starting to ramp up the anti-communist propaganda again, but through the dying down of the Cold War hysteria, the opening up of the Soviet archives, there are a lot of claims that have been made by Cold Warriors that have had to have been walked back on. Robert Conquest himself has had to walk back on a number of his claims. And many of these claims have been walked back on, so much so that even like the very notion that Stalin is a dictator, for example, is even contested. Like people, like they say he was, but really, he wielded about as much power over the Soviet Union as the president wields over the United States. So if your definition of a dictator is a president with no term limits, then by all means, but I've come to understand the term dictator to mean someone who's like a true autocrat who can overrule the will of anyone and everyone, and it is his word or the highway. You know, dictators typically aren't this first among equals who is the leader of a team and is just one person partaking in a system of collective decision making. You know, but anyways. Baer said, contrary to what people say, he does not idolize Stalin, but merely holds a fair and balanced view. The man was neither a savior nor saint, but he was at once a very successful revolutionary, a great contributor to Marxist theory, and said to be a great listener and collaborator during discussions, unquote, Blair said. He credited Stalin for recognizing the threat posed by Nazi Germany and having the tactical ability to successfully defeat the world's greatest invading army, combining with the strength to make tough decisions that have no easy answers, unquote. Baer said that people ought to read everything Stalin wrote before forming opinions about the man, whom he refers to as, quote, one of the greatest leaders of the 20th century, he wrote. The Twitter thread prompted a wave of mostly negative comments, with users evoking Stalin's policies that have been blamed for causing the deaths of millions of people. Quote, while his statements and ideas may be unpopular or even controversial, his right to express himself is constitutionally protected, unquote. Wow, they actually tried to cancel him over this. Jesus. The college district's chancellor told Fox News, adding that Baer's comments, quote, are his and not reflective of the general position of the values of RCC and the districts. The RCCD and its leadership strongly supports and defends the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the rights of students, faculty, and all citizens to express their ideas and opinions in accordance with the laws of this great country, unquote. Mary Figuera, the president of the District Board of Trustees, added, we don't always agree with our faculty news, but we have the right to own it, unquote. Baer did not respond to Fox News' request for comments. Shit, I'm going to email this guy. Or never mind. I guess I got to reach out to him on Twitter. The most based man alive. I'm going to follow him, but I forgot my Twitter name password, so I'll do that later. So yeah, no, just look at how the article begins, though, praising Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin. Yeah. Dictator Stalin voted third greatest Russian historical figure. Yeah, no, but that's the narrative. That's the narrative that's been engineered over the course of literal decades, you know? I mean, people don't realize, and this is something I try to explain, but there is a reason to lie about this stuff, people. I'm just saying right now. And there's a lot of really good literature on the subject that paints a clearer and more balanced view of what Soviet Russia and what life under Stalin was actually like. I mean, yeah, he was far from a perfect leader. You'd be a fool to say that he was a perfect leader, but you can't deny that he's made incredible achievements, not only to Marxist theory, but through his leadership and his guidance, his wisdom, and his activities as a revolutionary. During the Civil War, he had a critical role to play in maintaining many of the shipments and supply lines with like food and provisions for the Red Army during the war. He had a decisive role to play during that Civil War. And before that, he had a decisive role to play engaging in underground illegal activities, mainly robbing banks, you know. His nickname was Koba because he was basically a dashing rogue in his youth who, robbed banks, robbed trains, who stole from the rich and quite literally gave to the poor and used that money to fund revolutionary activities, to pay the cadres a salary, the Bolshevik Party, to pay the Bolsheviks a salary, like each cadre that were a part of the Bolsheviks. So he had a hand to play in that. He had been deported to Siberia on numerous occasions and been in and out of jail. Like, he had a very crucial and important role to play. And when Lenin fell ill, the Central Committee had responsibility bestowed upon Stalin to basically make sure to take care of him, to make sure that he stays out of politics, and to pretty much be his stand-in, his placeholder, because Stalin was picked by Lenin to be the general secretary of the party. He was originally appointed by Lenin and then reappointed by the Central Committee. And it's very funny to me how people want to sit here and act like Trotsky was the rightful successor. Now, Trotsky did do one good thing, and he did have a very decisive and important role to play during the Civil War, being a brilliant tactician, great general, leading the Red Army. But before that, he was a Menshevik. He was a Menshevik all the way up until the October Revolution, and when he flipped and switched sides. And then afterwards, he, in his elitism and his hubris, was constantly trying to contest Stalin for his position, even though he already been appointed there fair and square. Trotsky's ideas were largely utopian and unrealistic. Permanent revolution is an incredibly unrealistic policy and very unpopular. Like, what makes you think that after a bloody world war and a bloody civil war, which killed like 8 to 9 million people between the two, that claimed millions of lives, what makes you think people are going to want to go on and fight yet another war? But that's what Trotsky was in favor of. But the problem is that they got encircled in the early 1920s, and they didn't really. There was no potential. So Stalin, the pragmatic one, proposed socialism in one country. We stay here and we try to build socialism on the home front and provide like a shining example. And that's eventually what they planned on doing. Trotsky, on the other hand, would go on to take Lenin's will, his testament. Some people, first off, it's very shaky as to whether or not that will is a genuine will, because it appeared at a very suspicious time, that when it was being circulated by the Trotskyites, like around the time of Lenin's death. And there's no stenographic signature on the original document, or because they have a stenographer who basically does stenography. He signs off on the paperwork and so on, and there's usually a stenographic signature on any orders or commands or calls from various members of the party. Well, there is no original stenographic documents of Lenin actually calling for Stalin's position. What we do have is his so-called will. And want to know what he says in the will? All he says is that Stalin is a very commendable, good revolutionary. But if we could find someone with his equal skill and talents who's a little bit less rude, I think we should have him repealed and replaced with that person instead. And you got to understand the context of what Lenin was writing this. Lenin's wife, Krupskaya, as well as like his secretaries and like, I guess his maids, were sneaking him letters to and from the Politburo and the Central Committee so that he could continue to have involvement in politics. And because Stalin caught wind of this and responsibility fell onto him to take care of Lenin, he ended up yelling at Lenin's wife. He ended up calling her up on the phone and bitching at her like, yo, what the hell are you doing? The doctors are saying to keep Lenin out of politics because the stress is going to kill him, which it eventually did. And, well, in the end, Lenin passes away. Trotsky tries to manipulate the words of a dying man to try and get Stalin pulled from his position, even like repeatedly insinuating that he killed the man. Well, ultimately, Stalin and his faction beat out Trotsky with overwhelming popularity. And then they would go on to erect the first socialist country, get the entire country on board for a socialist planned economy. And he held the country together, or his administration held the country together against impossible odds under capitalist encirclements and insurmountable amounts of pressure, leading them through the bloodiest war in human history, not to mention the fact that the Soviet Union became an industrial superpower on his watch. And I'm just saying, is it true that he had a dictatorial style rule? Yeah, he wasn't a true dictator, but he did rule like one at times. Is it also true that he killed people? Yeah, it's true. Stalin had people killed. Stalin was in a position to make a lot of tough decisions, but at the end of the day, he was a better alternative to whoever else could have been leading the country at the time. Like, who was going to be Lenin's successor, guys? Come on. Was it going to be Trotsky? Trotsky, the guy who wanted to continue war communism and wage war on Europe? Trotsky, the guy who would have been a literal dictator had he been in his position? No, not at all. Trotsky, who wanted to continue all these unpopular policies at a time when it wasn't pragmatic. Nobody liked war communism. The peasantry did not like war communism. And they tried to do the decentral higher stage, higher phase socialism where you just have mass organizations from below in the beginning, but I mean, it didn't pan out. So yeah, no, Trotsky wasn't a pragmatic solution. And then on the other hand, you have Bukharin. Bukharin as an alternative to Stalin. The Soviet Union remains a social democracy. They continue to struggle with grain shortages and famines year in and year out because private agriculture is less efficient than collectivization. I mean, yeah, in the beginning, collectivization was performing more poorly in the beginning. However, as the years went on and they continued to collectivize and industrialize their agriculture, they eventually got to a point to where, they were able to keep the army fed and during World War II, and they were able to logistically have stockpile after stockpile of grain, silo after silos of grain. And yeah, they never had another famine again. And calorie consumption consistently rose after World War II. Yeah, they had a famine after World War II, but that's not because Soviet planning doesn't work. It's because the Nazis came in and obliterated their infrastructure. That includes their farming infrastructure. So they had to recover from that, and it ended up leading to a famine. So, yeah. Long story short, Stalin's fuck-ups are vast, and he made plenty of mistakes. But he built the first functional, successful, socialist planned economy in completely uncharted territory. The first socialist planned economy when no prior model ever existed. Remember, guys, there was no other big socialist country up to this point. Yeah, we had the Paris Commune, a 3-month experiment that was in a block taking place in Paris, but nothing like a full-fledged Soviet Union, man. Well, first successful socialist model that does raise living standards, that does modernize the country with a rapidity never before seen at a time when they were embargoed, sanctioned, and encircled by a bunch of capitalist countries that wanted them dead. And they were the only country at the time taking a consistent stance against fascism. It was the Soviets time and time again that wanted to counter the Nazis through their activities throughout the 1930s. And it was the French and the British that continued with their policies of appeasement. So, actually, USSR had sort of regional famines after the Great Patriotic War. I'm not familiar, but as far as I'm aware, they didn't have a big one like the famine of 32. I can believe that they were probably having food shortages afterwards, but on the other hand, I don't think anything on the scale of the Volga famine or the 32 famine ever happened again. I'm fairly confident that they never had another major famine again after that. What is my definition of fascism? Okay, this is a good question. Because you have two main definitions that came out of the Politburo. Trotsky's definition, which is reasonably accurate, basically a displaced petty bourgeoisie with a false nationalistic class conscious that it's a movement of the petty bourgeoisie, the most reactionary components of the petty bourgeoisie that arise as a reaction to the failure of a socialist movement or the lack thereof of a socialist movement. And then there's the other definition, which was given by Dmitriev, which is, the outright terroristic rule of the most reactionary components of the dictatorship of capital. I lean more towards Trotsky's definition. I don't think they're both mutually exclusive, but for me, fascism is a cultural and historic phenomenon in which it's basically far-right ideology. Like, they're basically reactionaries in the extreme. They're people that aren't even like believers in liberal ideology. Like, fascists are not liberals. They don't agree with liberalism, like liberal Enlightenment values. They reject liberal Enlightenment values in favor of a kind of top-down social order where the weak die, the strong survive, and my superior in-group does well. It involves the otherizing of others. That's basically who the fascists are. They're far right. It's an incredibly goofy, silly, and self-contradictory ideology that basically requires you to lie to everyone, including yourself, to believe in it. So a fascist will, because their ideology is so contradictory and it's so flimsy and so weak, it's pure feels. It's the ultimate amalgamation of a desire to return to a time long lost that never was, to the good old days, so to speak. They're anti-progress. They're anti-progress. They're anti-socialist because communism is progressive. They're more about what they're against than what they're for, too. Like, they recognize all the problems with the system, but they blame socialism for it, even though we live under capitalism. So yeah. So examples of some modern fascist movements would include the likes of like the Proud Boys. I don't know if you guys know who the Proud Boy is. They're basically America's brown shirts, or the Ku Klux Klan. Basically, these neo-reactionary groups that are all about their religious, puritanistic, patriarchal ideas. So basically, it's like a more extreme version of conservatism more than anything else. It's just far-right ideology. That's what fascism is. They've never been relevant. They've always been on the fringes. They've always constituted like a minority of the population. They're typically a movement of the petty bourgeoisie, like usually the mid-income petty bourgeois, who act as kind of a populist base for ruling class hegemony. Now, the ruling class, liberals do not like fascists. Liberals and fascists do not get along. They generally despise one another. But when push comes to shove, liberals are willing to tolerate and sponsor fascist movements if it means using them as their shock troops to crush a workers' movement. Because fundamentally, fascism is not a threat to private property like communism is, which is why, though the feds do fuck with fascists, they do crack down on them and they do enforce the law, their activities in terms of cracking down disproportionately go towards the left wing. It's the left that disproportionately get targeted by the feds and targeted by the police and so on, because the left is actually a threat to power. The left actually has a cohesive, well thought out intellectual ideology that has centuries of theory behind it and practice that actually seeks to challenge power in the ways that it needs to be challenged to uproot the old social order in favor of a new one. The only thing that fascists and communists really have in common is their desire to overthrow the current system and establish a new order. The difference is that communists take power in revolution, while fascists are either installed by the most rightist components of the capitalist class, or they take power and assume power in a coup d'etat. Long story short, in my eyes, I see liberalism and fascism as two sides of the same coin fundamentally, because fundamentally it's about the protection and maintenance of private property. Both are in favor of a class society. Both are in favor of a class society of growing income inequality. Yeah, liberals might want to implement policies to soften the sharp edges of capitalism. Liberals are they're in favor of extending voting rights to minorities, and they have some progressive policies that they might be in favor of. Well, left liberals do. Right liberals, or as called conservatives, seek to maintain the current social order. So, yeah, those are like the four positions. You have the far left, the far left socialists / communists. These are the people that genuinely want to build socialism or communism, and it involves revolution, right? So you got your socialists and your communists. So let me go get a paint going. Honestly, fascism, it's really more like a hardcore social democracy. It's a type of commandist capitalism. Historical fascist movements are just a type of command capitalism that includes state planning and some Keynesian economics, but ultimately it's geared towards the aggressive privatization and aggressive maximization of profits. Historically existing fascist projects pretty much outright terrorize the general populace into servility. But here, let me show you guys something. Little lesson here. Excuse me. So I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. So little lesson, and this is my perception, the real spectrum. All right. So what we got here is the spectrum. We're all on the spectrum, right? I know I'm on the spectrum. So I'm going to start right here. And right here, I'm going to have conservatives, or what I call right-wing liberals. Then you have actual liberals, like right here, or what I call progressives. So we have, I'm having the right wing on the left side. That's funny. Actually, yeah, I'll put it over here instead. So you have conservatives, you have what is called liberals or left liberals. I mean, there's layers to this, but you have left liberals right here, or what I generally call progressives. Left liberals, rad libs. So left libs, rad libs, progressives are right here. And then right here you have the actual left. Like this is like the true left. The ones that want to establish a new social system because they believe the current one is fundamentally broken are right here. So here you have we'll just call it the left, or the far left. Far left, which is constituted by anarchists, socialists, communists. So here's the far left. So there's the left, right? And then over here you have progressives, left liberals, and then over here you have reaction, like genuine reactionaries. And then fascists, Nazis, third position. So I want to start by saying, or I want to continue this by saying that conservatives and fascists are not the same thing. A lot of people like to say like conservatives, neocons, libertarians are fascists. They're really not. Fascists are actually an incredibly fringe group. They're incredibly fringe. So really conservatives, I'll just go ahead and start with conservatives. Conservatives do not believe in change. They don't believe in social change. They're people that think the system is fine as is, and they want to keep the system as is. All right. Traditional progressives or liberals do want change. They want to implement, but they want to act through the legal channels, through reform. They're primarily reformists. So they might want their free college, their single payer health care. They might want to raise taxes on the wealthy, try to have a more equitable distribution of wealth, more equitable capitalism. They see the problems with the system, but they think it's a good enough system to the point to where it's not worth overthrowing. Next up, I'm going to draw this. See that right there? This is Bernstein. Bernstein is what I would call a democratic socialist. I'm sure you guys are familiar. A lot of people don't know what democratic socialism actually means, but really what DemSocs are, they are socialists. Like, these people want socialism. They want communism, but they are primarily reformists, election, revolution at the ballot box types. So this is where you get your Bernsteins and your Kautskys, people that think we should just primarily struggle for reform, and that through reforms and capitalism becoming more and more developed through advances in the productive forces and the continuous struggle for reform, we would eventually reach a system that resembles something like communism, because so much wealth has been created in such an abundance, and through the state and regulations and so on, we end up at a point to where, you know, even though there's inequality, everybody's wealthy to the point to where all their needs are taken care of and there's no deprivation. So you get a system resembling communism. So here, yeah, you got your Bernsteins, Kautskys, Bukharins, Dengists, etc. And the reason why I include Dengists in this crowd is because Dengism is fundamentally a reformist tendency. They believe that China is going to reform its way to socialism. So if you believe that that's a valid path towards socialism, then, and that it is not class struggle that drives human progress, but it is instead advances in the productive forces and reform, then yeah, Dengism is just a type of reformist socialism. Lastly, you have these three trends. Well, not lastly. We've already talked enough about reactionaries, but we'll come back to them in a second. Anarchists, socialists, and communists are what the genuine far left is. All three of these groups believe in revolution of some kind or another. And the main contention between anarchists and communists is that, well, both want revolution. The anarchists seek to immediately abolish the state right after the revolution. Communists, on the other hand, seek to seize state power, and through reforms and policies and advances in productive forces, and through the reconditioning of human psychology away from bourgeois psychology, the need for a state and bodies of armed men will wither away organically on its own. And the difference between communists and socialists are that communists, I consider a communist to be someone who is a follower of Marx's work, a believer in Marx's ideas, who upholds Marxism, who, you know, follows the Marxist book. You're a scientific socialist, in other words. While a socialist is someone who wants socialism, but they're just like a non-Marxist socialist, but they're not an anarchist either. These people exist. You know, you've got your Gaddafyists, your fucking, what are they called? Bundists, yes. Bundists are another type. Those are just a couple that I can think of. Your Titoists and so on. So let's go back to the far right. Let's finish with reactionaries, and then I'll be done with my spiel. All right? So these people want change for a new system. These people want to reform their way to it. These people don't want a new system. They just want a friendlier version of the current one. These people think the system is fine as is and doesn't need change. And then these people right here believe the system needs change, and they are willing to go to the point of coup d'etat or extreme violent uprising to achieve it, but they want to go in the opposite direction. They want to return to an idealized time, be it Rome, the land of the Vikings and Nords, the glorious bloodline powers of the ancient elven world, the Nazis, ancestor worship, hero worship. It's peak ideology, peak idealism on steroids. So yeah, this is where you get your KKKs and your brown shirts and your Proud Boys, and so on. So there, done with the spiel. Sorry that took so long. It's just running my mouth. Radlibs don't deserve the wall. They just deserve to have their wealth stripped and live a day in the third world. I don't really even think they deserve that. Like, honestly, Radlibs may be useful idiots to the status quo. But I mean, at the end of the day, they're just liberals. A lot of these people are just confused, and it's our job to help them understand, the problem is that they agree with a lot of the socialist ideology, but they don't think like socialists. Like, their brains haven't been wired like that of a dialectical materialist. So they're still going to be in the same mood or mode of, oh, we need to do this, this, and that reform here in the moment, forgetting about the long-term stability of the movement. The fundamental problem with radical liberalism is the same issue that I have with really just revisionism in general. It's opportunistic, it's unscientific, and revisionism has been the death of many socialist movements and has failed time and time again. Let's look at some examples of some revisionists that have failed, all right? I mean, not all revisionists, but most of them have failed. The only revisionist tendency that I can think of, actually, I don't even consider Juche to be revisionist. It's just Marxism-Leninism adapted to the conditions of North Korea. But anyways, where was I? Oh yeah. Radlibs who deserve the wall are the sex pests on Discord. Yes, but not because they are radlibs, but because they are sex pests. Thoughts on minarchist socialists? I mean, I'm going to talk to one here in like 7 days, 8 days. So I got done railing against revisionism, or what I call rightist socialism. Now let's talk about ultra-leftism. I lied, guys. There's another rung on this list. There's another. You can be even further left than a communist. Watch this. All right. I mean, you can technically be even further right than a reactionary too, but we'll add an extra. We'll elongate the tip a little bit. So there we go. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to take these anarchists right here, and I'm going to move them over here. So, what is the ultra-left? All right? The ultra-left, unlike the revisionists, are a different type of individualist. They believe in policy and ideology that is so far left. In fact, it is too far left. So much so that they will want to basically get rid of the state at the onset and, skip the socialist and dictatorship of the proletariat and go straight to communism. You've got people like this, right? Other types of ultras you have are, well, traditionally, left comms. These are the people that believe that no socialism is true socialism, and they have to constantly quote snipe Marx and, basically cherry pick the hell out of Marx and use like these really vague specific quotes in order to try and say it wasn't real socialism. And then you have a couple other examples. Gonzaloists. You have people right here, people that, sorry, I'm standing up. People like this who are a type of ultra that are so far left, they believe their ideas are the only correct ones, that they're the highest stage of Marxism. They're the most educated revolutionaries, the most advanced, most bestest, most perfectest line. So much so to the point to where they will openly be hostile to everyone in this direction. They consider the people over here to be this, and to be this at the same time. This is what the Gonzaloists are. Pretty much everyone to the right of Karl Marx is basically a fascist in their eyes. In other words, everybody that they don't like. So yeah. As far as I understand with minarchist socialism, sorry that I took my sweet time getting to this, but minarchist socialism just sounds to me like libertarian Marxism. We have the minimum state needed to maintain society, reproduce the economy. And when I hear that, when I think of that, well, then by that definition, if that is the definition, then I guess virtually every communist alive would technically be a minarchist, because we don't want like a super, I mean, we want a strong central government, what we believe it's necessary, but so I guess there is a difference ideologically. It's just, my question is like, where do you draw the line between how much is too much state and how much is too little? I mean, even after a certain point, communists think that there is such thing as too much state and that we should leave things to local individuals and local autonomy. So, I mean, where do you draw the line is my main question. Okay. So yeah, that's what we got. I'm gonna go ahead and close this out. So, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Like, it's not really about presenting rational arguments and meeting them where they are intellectually. Yeah, no, exactly. You want to meet the radlibs where they are and explain why their positions are correct. You have to teach them, because they're liberals that like the aesthetic of leftist language and socialism. You know, they're not truly comrades yet. So, exactly, that's our job. Hey, Trav, I'm of the opinion that there will be a female president. I'm not just going to be a Democrat. It's not just going to be a Democrat. The GOP has now gone full idpol. What are your thoughts on this? Oh, well, as a wise man once said, there are times when you have a unity of opposites, when you have the thesis, or you have a thing becoming its opposite. And in reaction to the collapse of the Republican Party and their campaign and their populist base of support back in 2020, with the floundering of Donald Trump and the January 6th riot, the optics and the image of the Republican Party have been obliterated. So, some radical changes are going to have to be made. A political realignment is going to have to occur. And as a result, the Republicans, you're going to see the Republicans, sorry, I'm standing up again, but you're going to see the Republicans, you're going to see them become increasingly more idpolly and progressive. I mean, I think they're still going to play to the white Christian identity politics. I just think they're going to get a lot more, they're just going to be more intersectional. You're just going to see more intersectional Republican Party. What do you think about the developing socialism, Brezhnev's theory? Do you think that the USSR or any other country achieved it? I believe the Soviet Union achieved socialism in the year 1933. I think that they were officially a socialist planned economy by 33, because at that point, in my perspective, between capitalism and communism is like between man and ape, you know? Where do you draw the line between man and ape? So when I see, ape going on his way to man, in between, you have a transition, you have Australopithecus. So when I think of socialism, this is what I think of. Back to full screen time. Share Australopithecus, right? So right here we have, perfect chart. So we'll go ahead and look at this. So we had capitalism, and then on the way to communism, we have stages of socialism. And in my opinion, my humble opinion, once you have a society where the vast majority of its industry has been nationalized and socialized, and the economy is operating according to a common rational plan, as well as the means in which social surplus is no longer being extracted through wage labor and is instead being extracted, distributed, and managed by political decisions drawn up by the economic planners. The point is that social surplus is no longer basically dictated by the laws of motion of capital. So instead, you have a system where we just have planned inputs and outputs, and we pay people according to their work, after necessary deductions have been made for upkeep of civilization. So the Soviet Union met all three prerequisites: nationalized, socialized economy, that's all operating according to a cooperative plan, and with social surplus being managed by a political bureaucracy or by the workers instead of being, left up to the whims of private capitalists and investors. So, and in a higher stage of socialism, you would have you would eventually start to do away with the process of commodity production in general. You would see the downsizing of the army, the lifting of borders. You would see countries beginning to merge into bigger and bigger countries, and the borders between them will become more superficial. Nuclear arsenals will start to be disarmed globally. Money is abolished. That's another sign of a higher phase of communism. So the abolition of money, distribution according to need instead of according to work, the fading away of bourgeois right, and more direct control by the people themselves as the governance of people gets replaced with the administration of things. So I think it's in layers. But I think as long as you have those three prerequisites, then yeah, it's basically socialist. Sorry I hope that was a satisfactory answer. I've been wary of radlibs since one called me a racist slur and mocked workers in India. Oh, you mean radlibs have racial prejudices? Well, gee, who would have thought? I think it's kind of funny how these people who are always crying and calling and for concern trolling for racist behavior, support for BLM, end up falling prey to it and being guilty of it themselves. I think that's funny. All right. But anyways, this is running about 20 minutes longer than I wanted it to. I'm going to go ahead and bring up the last article for the day, and we'll finish it, because this is an issue that I've been wanting to comment on for a while. So I'm going to go ahead and lower my camera. Cool. Yeah, I would. Zionism is absolutely a fascist ideology. Well, yeah, information technology is going to play a very critical role in the economy in the future with respect to the overall economic plan, just because it streamlines the hell out of economic calculation. You could have an entire network of computers across the country using linear programming and spreadsheets that just actively receive and feed back information in real time and give fairly accurate economic calculation, I've been wanting to make my own video on the ECP, but Hakeem already did a glorious one on it. I want to try and make one because there's stuff he didn't cover. I want to try and make a more extensive video where I talk about exactly how you would plan a socialist economy. But for me to do that, I need to reread Towards a New Socialism, and I need to go through some documents I have on linear programming. But anyways, let's talk about Inceldom. What do you guys know about Inceldom? Well, let me tell you a little bit about it. So, Inceldom, for those of you who don't know, means involuntary celibate. It's basically someone who's never had sex but desires sex, or someone who has had sex and wishes to have sex but hasn't had sex in a very, very long time, say 6 months. I think that's the classification for it scientifically. If you've gone without 6 months, 6 months without sex, but you're actively seeking it out and you want to have sex, then you are involuntarily celibate. Contrary to what most will tell you, women can be incels too, but that's only because the name of the game is different for women. For women, they're looking for a partner that has something to offer them, who can provide, emotional and intimate physical support, basically. They're looking for someone who can support them, because there are differences between men and women. and I'm going to acknowledge this. This doesn't make me sexist for acknowledging there are differences between men and women. So, trigger warning. But when it comes to human reproduction and like dating and courting, culturally around the world, responsibility and initiative must fall on the man to court the woman. And what this means is he has to walk up to her and ask her on a date. So, pressure falls on the man to make the first move and set things up initially. And as a result, women are the pursued sex. So women, because they're pursued and because the options pretty much present themselves to her, just by virtue of being a woman, because humans have evolved great amounts of sexual dimorphism as a result of our evolutionary biology. The reason why women have big booties and wider hips and small feet and, perky boobs, and they have a fairer complexion, smaller, less muscular face than we do, is these are all signs of fertility, that she is a good baby maker, basically. That's why women have wider hips, is because we evolved these big old brains, these big, incredible brains that are too big to pass through her snatch, so she evolved wider hips to compensate for the bigger brain. Big brain. Big brain. So, as a result, two things. One, women have evolved to basically be the child bearers. They bring children into the world. And when a woman has a kid with a man, she's effectively going to be incapacitated for 9 months while rocking that baby lump. And not only that, but giving birth and nourishing a fetus it goes to war on a woman's body. There's a lot of energy, there's a lot of resources that her body has to use in order to nourish the fetus. I've seen before women who have had multiple kids who's actually lost teeth because while they were pregnant, the infant was soaking up all of their calcium to the point to where their teeth were rotting out. That's the kind of toll that having a kid can take on a woman's body. All right. So, as a woman, not only socially, but biologically, they have a propensity to basically be more picky with mates. Reasonably so, because this is the person that you want. You want a person that's going to stick around to help you raise the kid, for one. And for two, because reproduction is a much significantly bigger investment for women than it is for men. I mean, for men, you just go and you fuck her and then you're good. But a woman's going to be pregnant for 9 months afterwards. So she's going to want someone who's going to stick around and provide her with security. So women are looking for men who can provide them with security and excitement. And so there is a greater standard. Women have higher standards because of this. They have a higher standard in what they desire out of a mate. So as a result, if you're a young guy and you go cold approach women, even if you have a good approach, expected to get turned down a lot. Like, you're just going to get turned down a lot. That's just the way the cookie crumbles. And until you don't, you will get turned down until you don't. And then you're going to date that girl. And if she likes you, you guys are very likely going to have sex. And then, boy, is it going to be a pain in the ass to shake her off, because she's going to want to sink her teeth into you, and she's going to want to maintain a relationship with you, because there's an emotional bonding that goes with sexual intercourse as well. It's not just a physical thing. Well, it's all physical, chemical-wise, but having sex with someone, sharing that sort of intimacy kind of bonds you two. And, of course, because women are hardwired to reproduce, and men, at the same time, on the other hand, for some reason, men are hardwired to want to fuck every woman that he sees. Like, men are hardwired to copulate, basically. So that's why guys, when they walk around in public, speaking as a man, I'm going out in public, I'm with my dude bros back when I was in college, like, dude, she's hot. Yeah, she is. You want to go make a move on her? Like, hell yeah, I'm going to try to get her number, bro. Yeah, that chick has a nice... These are the thoughts that go through a young man's mind. So, what are some changes socially and culturally? Well, we had the sexual revolution in the 60s, which is a good thing. Women now have the freedom to fuck whoever they please without shame. And this is doubly supported because of the wide abundance and availability of contraception. So there are a lot of people that are sex negative. I personally don't have a problem with women or men sleeping around. I think it's a good thing because, hey, it makes getting laid easier. So, and getting laid feels good. So as long as people are wearing condoms and they're practicing safe sex and it's all consensual, I don't see a problem with it. So, but that's not the only thing that's happened. We are seeing a growing amount of social alienation in society through the chemicals in the water that are turning the frogs gay, to the internet age, to COVID. COVID, by the way, COVID has waged war on the fucking dating scene, by the way. My brother is single and he is under a mother of all dry spells right now, largely because of COVID. That's a big reason why. A lot of people just aren't having sex. I wouldn't be surprised because this statistic says that it's at about, what, 23%, 30%? In my opinion, it says 28% back in 2018. I'm willing to bet that was like as high as 50% as of last year because there was no social interaction going on during COVID. So, but why is this a phenomenon? Let's talk about this. There's a rising amount of sexlessness in both men. Well, a nominal rise in women, but a much more significant rise in men. And incels will tell you it's because of apps like Tinder, because the Tinder dating app is like a meat market where you can just swipe right on people that you find attractive. And, you know, because women are the pursued sex and the approach sex, you know, as a woman, you're going to get 10 times as many swipes and as many matches as a man. So you're going to have way more options, which is going to shrink down the pool for the dating pool for men. And not only that, but we're living in an extreme age of social isolation and alienation. And because of this, young men are not properly socialized. We have increasing numbers of people who are neurotypical, have Asperger's syndrome and so on, and are just generally socially inept because alienation, primarily driven by capitalism, as well as, you know, well, yeah, alienation's a big part. People are atomized, isolated. Literally everything about life has become a market. You can't get any resources or material support or human services without, you know, going through the price barrier of a private entity, you know. So we're living in an extremely alienated, atomized time where everyone's like hyper individualized, and the social scene where you would have the opportunity to interact with lots of women, you know, is changed, because that's really like what the problem is. People have fewer and fewer people that they can call friends. And I think that this lack of sex is a symptom of a much bigger problem. All right. It's a symptom of a much bigger problem in the sense that like people trust each other less anymore. They're more isolated, dude. It's especially bad in the United States. People here are antisocial and individualistic as hell. It's ridiculous. And fucking nobody wants to rock the boat. Everyone's afraid because we're all living these precarious, shitty lives where we're a paycheck away from destitution. So we have something to lose by resisting or trying to rock the boat. So people have too much to lose, and that's why nothing's changing. But that's a different tangent. I'm going to check StreamYard real quick. Oh, shit. Let's see. Against the Rivers commenting. These thoughts come to minds in part because of our conditioning. Against the River, true, but that serves several generations. Actually, in socialism, incels do not exist because society is desexualized and more natural. Yeah, no. Capitalism exploits the ever-living shit out of women's sexuality. So men, because of testosterone, we're very visual. I mean, women are visual too, but men are like hardwired to want to like procreate. With any woman that exhibits the dimorphic traits that, you know, show that she's fertile and nubile. So that's just natural. The issue is that capitalism exploits the shit out of it by putting women's sexuality literally everywhere. So, like, you have men who are seeing women sexualized literally everywhere, and it's like hyper sexualized, hyper commodified. So you're just going to have sex charged men who are just sex charged all the time, and then you enter a culture that is not exactly conducive to social developments. You have the existence of things like pornography, where you get to watch people have sex and it leaves out all of the emotional and physical buildup and connection that eventually leads to the point to where you have sex. You have that outlet so people can just easily jerk off and get their nut in without having to put the effort in. So it's a litany of factors that are compounding onto one another that are increasing to the incel phenomenon. And this is the reason why we've got 30% of young adult men who have yet to been laid. They are, but more men die of infant mortality, and men have like 5 years less life expectancy on average. There are more women on Earth than there are men. No, incel is a very recent phenomenon, and it's partly coincides with the computer age and the advent of Tinder and online dating. Like, that's when I noticed, like, Tinder hit the scene a little over a decade ago, and then all of a sudden we just see this sharp rise in inceldom. So I think a lot of it does come down to human psychology being manipulated. But otherwise, I do believe that socialism would help with this problem, mainly because we could have public health campaigns that could directly target it. Because whether you guys like it or not, the incel problem is an issue that needs to be dealt with, all right? Like, you can't not deal with the incels. Like, we have to address their needs, and we have to talk about these problems, and we have to be open to, like, listening to their ear about what their concerns are. Because if we don't do it, then they're going to go on forums full of fascists and neo-Nazis and neo-reactionaries that do not have the right answers, and two, they're going to go to incel forums where, you know, they'll form these toxic communities where they'll insulate, and they'll all circle jerk about how sorry they feel for themselves, and it'll develop a really warped, fucked, negative view of women in the world. And that's how we get our Elliot Rodgers. That's how we get who are those other kids that the spree killing? But that's how you get them to turn into spree killers. They give up on the world. They feel like such losers that the only way that they feel like they can get back on top and feel like winners, even if it's for like the last hour of their life before they kill themselves or go to prison, is by taking the lives of a bunch of other people. So this is a serious, genuine problem, and I would at least grant a modicum of sympathy for the incels. They're a product of their environment. They're mind-locked, gridlocked into that toxic mindset. And I sympathize with them because I can relate to them, all right? So, little story time. Wait. No sex or socialism or porn or in past socialist systems. You see, I agree with the sentiment. Because pornography does have some damaging effects on the public health. Same goes with prostitution. I mean, the issue is, this just kind of, I guess, goes with my libertarian values, so to speak. But the problem with prohibition of these things is that it doesn't work. People are just going to try to go underneath the watchful eye of the state so that they can, you know, go through their little gray or black markets. And personally, I think I would prefer it be legal and reined into the watchful eye of the proletarian government so that it can be done safer, cleaner, and there's more accountability involved. Then we outlaw it, and then people just go under the table and do it anyways, illegally, decentrally. So we need to shift away from the prohibition punishments mindset and shift more towards the rehabilitative or the preventative medicine mindset. Why do people feel the need to become prostitutes? Why do people feel the need to sleep with prostitutes? Why do people feel compelled to watch porn? You know? Why do incels go to these forums or they insulate themselves and circle jerk. It's because they feel validated by it. They feel validated. They feel vindicated. Like, okay, I've got it so bad. I'm so sorry for myself, but hey, at least I'm not alone. Yeah, I might be failing and I feel like I'm a failure, but at least I'm not failing alone. We can fail together, you know? That's kind of the mindset that I'm talking about here. Honestly, the vast majority of people that get into sex work do it for the money. Vast, overwhelming majority of them. If you had a full employment program and the abolition of money and replacing it with labor credits, all you would do is make it so that just make it so that it's not considered an official job. Basically, it's not a job, you know. Because sex is not fucking work. I don't care what anyone says. It's not work. It's not work any more than playing video games is work. So people actually have to get real jobs. But at the same time, if people are exchanging sex for favors, then no reason to regulate that. So, but the thing is, this is a much more equal transaction, and there's a much, much more diminished power dynamic. As in, there's way less potential for abuse if someone is trading their body in exchange for a favor or in exchange of an item versus trading it for money, you know? So, prostitution wouldn't be a crime because it would be rendered obsolete, is the general idea. And if in any sort of trade exchange for sex that's going on is something that people would just do in their spare time, no reason to regulate it. As for pornography, that is something that I do think needs to have some sort of government oversight, because if you outlaw it or ban it, I mean, then again, I don't know, that's a tough one. It's not something I think should fall into the hands of the state, but it's also not something that I think should be like punishable with time in jail. So it's another one of those things, like, it's not illegal, but it's not exactly legal either. So the idea is like, you just decriminalize it. Actually, at least historical failed horribly. In USSR, prostitution existed as white dance and only started after the first steps in perestroika. They were rare. I can believe prostitution was in the USSR. Absolutely. But not for the same reasons that it exists here in America. The reason why there were still a few unemployed people, still a few homeless people, and still a few hookers in the Soviet Union was because people were willingly doing it. Like, there are people who genuinely want to be homeless or they want to live out in the woods as an alternative lifestyle choice. Like, there are people that genuinely want to live like that. They're few and far between, but I mean, you can't rule them out. They are out there. What about people with severe mental disabilities and bodily abnormalities where they legitimately can't get someone to have sex with them? State-sanctioned sex workers sounds pretty fucking based. I'm not going to lie. I don't know. If there's someone who genuinely can't get laid or they can't have sex, I mean, I'm sure we'll be able to find some sort of outlet for it under socialism. I don't think people should be paid to have, I don't really think like we should dish out labor tokens for, you know, people to be prostitutes or porn stars. But I think in those types of rare cases, I don't know, you probably could have some state-sanctioned sex workers. Gorbachev legalized it and brought it to light, increased the numbers drastically. Yeah, but in 1999, students in Riga University even said that they would want to become white dancers. Well, the reason why it exploded under Gorbachev is because he restored capitalism in 87. Capitalism was already basically there, but it was state capitalism, social democracy with co-ops. I mean, I'm of the position that the Soviet Union ceased to be a fully socialist country in the year 1987 because of Glasnost and Perestroika. or more specifically perestroika, because his economic reforms were basically the precursor to the kind of liberalization that would come in the year 91. I mean, it's possible that it increased the numbers, but it's likely that he just brought it into the light, like it was already going on, and then then it became public knowledge. And I can believe that numbers would go up, just the sheer convenience of availability. But I mean, even then, I feel like there's better solutions to the problem than prohibition. Anyways, last comments on incels, because I'm about to close. Incels are a genuine problem that needs to be addressed, all right? They need to be talked about. These people need self-help. They need advice. They need friends. They need loved ones. And they need an environment to give them positive reinforcement, all right? Because that's fundamentally the reason why they're having the issues that they are in the first place. Lack of friends, social alienation, they're in a toxic or negative environment. They might have a mental disability of some kind. Many of incels have a mental disability of some kind, like they might be autistic or might have a learning disability or just Asperger's syndrome, something wrong with them. Also, Trav, what do you think of antinatalism? Like people that legitimately think there isn't any imperative to have children. I think they are very stupid. They are free to not have kids, but don't try to fucking push me or anyone else to not have kids. If you don't want to exist anymore and existence is so much pain, it's so sad, then just go fucking kill yourself. Like, fucking seriously. What the fuck? Do babies can't give consent, therefore giving birth is a moral crowd sound like incels? They sound like a bunch of fucking idiots is what they sound like. I never asked to be born. All right, but I'm getting distracted. I want to talk about incels for a minute longer. So, yeah, what would definitely help these people is if we had soup kitchens, community gardens, community places where people can meet up and talk to one another in a social context with no alcoholic beverages or drugs involved. We need to train people to be able to socialize and communicate, create environments where people are basically given the opportunity to be the best versions of themselves. I think counseling could help a lot of incels. I think self-help and improvement, so is anyone here genuinely an incel? Does anyone here genuinely struggle with the opposite sex and would like some sound advice? Because I can actually speak to someone like that, and I actually do have some sound advice for anyone who requires it. There's 21 people here, so if there are any incels in your crowd, let me know. At one point, I was technically an incel. Little personal anecdote. The first 21 years of my life, I didn't have a girlfriend. I didn't get laid. I was extremely socially awkward. I was diagnosed with ADHD, ADD, and Asperger's syndrome. So that's something that I had to deal with throughout my childhood. All right. I didn't have a lot of friends in high school. I did very poorly in a lot of classes. I was bullied. I didn't really have a lot of friends. But the friends I did have were very good and that I'm still in contact with for years to come. On top of that, had a lot of family drama, a lot of family trauma that I've had to deal with throughout my life. But at the end of the day, my family, though somewhat dysfunctional, is functional enough to where it was a very loving and caring environment. And through a combination of self-improvements, as well as being in a good environment where I have loved ones who care about me, taking care of me, as well as having good friends and healthy social interactions over enough time, I was able to overcome my disabilities, for the most part. I still struggle with focusing and paying attention, and I still am kind of socially, I'm still kind of a weasel psychologically, but I'm way more of a normie now than I was 5 or 6 years ago. My 21st birthday, was a very important thing that happened to me. I met this MILF. She was 42. I was 21. She was one of my sister's coworkers, and I was just a socially awkward 21-year-old. I was still a virgin, and we went to this dance floor, and she took a liking to me, and well, I went home with her, and that night ended with me losing my virginity. We kept in touch for a couple of years. I mean, we were close. We were close, but after about 2 years, we went our separate ways because she was old enough to be my mom. And she even told me, like, you need to find someone your age. You need to meet people your age because I know I'm your first time and I know you eventually want to get married and have kids. And, I can't give you that. I can't give you what you actually need. So even though I love you and I really care about you, I'm breaking up with you. I'm a big girl. I can handle it, yada, yada. And in the end, we came to a mutual understanding. But the point is that the reason why that happened is because I had social interactions with women. So when you have social interactions with women, uh, really that's it. Just try to be friends with women. Try to be friends with people in general more than anything. Don't try to court them. Don't try to have sex with them. Just try to interact with women and try to have positive encounters with them because a lot of it does just come down to confidence. A lot of it comes down to confidence and being comfortable in your own skin and being comfortable around other people. That's something that has to be built. I'm not saying just be confident, bro. I think that's dumb advice. Be confident is actually pretty terrible advice you can give to someone who's never had sex. Speaking of someone who didn't, lose his virginity till 21. So what you need to do is do things that build confidence, that build charisma, that build social connections. So, you see a guy who's skinny and fat, um, and he struggles with women, be like, oh, now this is just for men, by the way. I don't have any good advice for women. This is just men for now. And I might talk about this in the future, but you see a guy who struggles with women who's skinny fat dude, maybe if he learned an instruments, picked up a good hobby and he started lifting weights and he leaned out, toned up, built a little muscle, lost some fat, and developed a good physique, maybe that would build him some confidence, maybe that would make him feel better about himself, like he has the ability to do it. Maybe if he got really good at guitar or became a really good cook, you know, then he'd have the confidence. It would give him more confidence. And it does build confidence, but the hard part is building confidence to actually approach and talk to women. I mean, I'm at a point to where I don't give a fuck. Like, if I see a girl I like, I mean, not now because I'm in a relationship, but I'm at a point psychologically to where I will ask a girl out, like if I like her, if I were single. That's pretty much where I'm at. But it takes time to get to that point because approach anxiety is a big deal, especially for someone who has had little to no positive interactions with women and positive social interactions in general. So approaching more women, not even just to like get with them, but to just try to be friends with them. Another thing is grooming. Looks do matter. Like men like a good looking chick who's healthy, chicks like a good looking guy who's healthy, which plays into the weightlifting advice. Getting a good physique, getting good clothes, taking care of the acne, washing your hair, just looking better and more presentable in general. Because, this is true for men and women. If you're better looking, people are going to naturally have a more positive disposition towards you. So that improving looks maxing is a thing. Definitely do that. Interacting with more women, not even necessarily to take them out on dates, but just to like try to make friends. Picking up some hobbies, build a morning routine, get some good discipline going. Try to make friends, like join a club or something. You will find other people that share things in common with you. You're looking for commonalities. So let's say you join a book club. You make some good friends at that book club, and you notice a cute girl that's there. Oh yeah, that's the other caveat to the advice. Make sure that the hobby you pick up is something chicks are into, like rock climbing or book reading, depending on the books. Or Even take up hobbies, even consider taking up hobbies that are traditionally considered girly, you know, like ballet or knitting or whatever. Just hobbies that typically you find women in. Just join one of those because, I mean, one, that's the easiest way to meet a shit ton of women. And two, if a girl sees that you're comfortable in your own sexuality and manhood, like let's say you have girlish hobbies or, you know, you have a gay friend, if she sees you've got gay friends and all that, you know, she's going to see a man who's comfortable with himself. And that is actually pretty attractive. Women like a man who's comfortable in his own skin, but you have to build up to that. This is all about building. You have to build yourself up in positive ways. You need to also, if you have a serious mental disability or something seriously wrong with you, consider cognitive behavioral therapy if you live in a country that doesn't price gouge you for healthcare. Cognitive behavioral therapy is something that can really help if you've got like a tic or you've got an issue that has yet to be resolved. It can help you, you know, improve your habits, build good habits. So cognitive behavioral therapy is definitely something that can help. Read books. Doesn't have, I mean, it can be any books that you want. Just start reading books because books will enrich your vocabulary. They'll help you become more spoken, give you better debate skills, better talking skills, interacting with people. I mean, learn to think of sex as something that, you know, you want it and there's nothing wrong with wanting it, but like, whenever you're around women, don't just make that like the first thing that's on your mind. Like, unless you're like this fucking guy. Unless your name is Peter Steele, if you just go up to a chick and immediately make the conversation sexual, there's a very good chance that she's just going to immediately turn you down. So, unless you look like this guy, don't approach women like that. So, anyways, let me read a couple things. I was socially alienated in school, wasn't quite found in following trends. I was listening to metal music to keep me from otherwise I would have lost my sanity. I was a huge metalhead too, comrade. I still listen to a lot of heavy metal. Even before I became a communist, I'm still socially alienated. My family is leaning to the far right as I'm speaking. I'm very sorry to hear that. What do you think about the 91 Augustus coup? Last ditch effort to save the Union, but I don't want to talk about that right now. So yeah, when approaching women, being around women, you want to come off as though you want absolutely nothing from them, because if they sense the thirst and they feel like you're just thirsting on them, then if they don't feel the same way about you, you're just going to creep them out. And the goal here is to have positive interactions. So, you know, I'm not even talking about, you know, be nice guy. Oh, be a nice guy and so on. No. I mean, being nice is important, but it's really just about building your confidence up and just being comfortable around women and being yourself. Because once you get to the point to where you're comfortable around other women and around people and like you're fully socialized and you're just comfortable and confident in your own skin and you've built yourself up to that point, of course, over years of self-improvement, then you'll be able to get laid pretty easily. Like, it's easier than you think once you've built yourself up to that point. It just takes time. And it requires you to not be a fucking toxic asshole. Like, I mean, there is a toxic way to get laid. Like, if you get into pickup art, what the pickup artists want, pickup artists, now talk about reactionaries. Most pickup artists are like straight up neocons and fascists. They're subhuman pieces of shit. But yeah, and they're extremely misogynistic. And the reason why the pickup art community exists is because, well, despite being massively misogynist and despite, you know, the damage that they might do, their advice works. You know, if you learn their shitty, toxic, manipulative advice where you gaslight, manipulate, and you break down and destroy a woman's self-esteem in the process, yeah, you can get laid. You can get laid, but it's going to be incredibly shallow, empty sex where you just fucked another human being in the head over, you know? And that's the reason why these circles exist. And there's a lot of negative, toxic mindsets that they have. Like, look at Roosh V. Let me give you guys an example. Go ahead and share the screen. Let's talk about Roosh V real quick. Roosh V. Like, this is what I'm talking about right here. Where's this channel? Did it get taken down? What the fuck's his channel? Roosh. Where are you, Roosh? Roosh V turns Christian, bans POA discussion on forum. How to turn your passion into profit. So yeah, for all this, so Roosh V, for those of you who don't know, is a famous misogynist who basically has an inferiority complex. The title back, I guess his channel's gone, but back when he had a channel, it was like, why women will never love you, reasons why women aren't as smart as men, why women can't do math, run as fast, or breathe as fast as men, like those kinds of videos. Let's talk about Elliot Holtz instead. Dating advice. You do not want to take dating advice from this guy. How to approach women. Oh, look, more comments. Well, whatever. I'm going to go ahead and kill the stream here in a second, but you guys get the idea. These forums, not just the Incel, POA, MGTOW, Manosphere, and I want to talk about this again eventually, but that circle of the internet, that angle of the internet is incredibly toxic and fosters a lot of misogynistic mindsets, a lot of reactionary misogynistic mindsets, and that I think something I want to eventually do is go out of my way to address the concerns of the incels, the MGTOW, because they do have genuine concerns, I know because I used to lurk MGTOW forums and, because I was, it was just something, I didn't know a lot about dating. I didn't have any dating prospects when I was 17, 18. So I used to go to those forums and around those spheres of the internet because it was an outlet, because I was a sexually frustrated 18-year-old and, I wasn't alone. There are countless sexually frustrated 18-year-olds who don't have a lot of friends, who are socially awkward, who have the issues that I'm talking about, who need an outlet. And that's part of the reason why they go to these circles, because it's validating and it makes them feel, like something's not too wrong with them and that there's something larger than themselves that's behind their social woes. So anyways, yeah, exactly. For real though, be casual and humane. 100% guaranteed way to get laid. Become a bread tuber and start a Discord for your female fans. Yeah, it's also how you catch a charge. Do you do martial arts? I did before COVID hit. It's been about a year and a half since I've rolled mat or threw fists. Occasionally I'll hit the heavy bag at my gym, but I'm getting back into it. Starting Monday. What you're seeing right here is my birthday money. I'm going to take my birthday money and I'm going to be returning to the MMA gym. What was it like when you first joined? It was brutal. When you don't have stamina and conditioning built up for it, mixed martial arts takes a heavy toll. You will be exhausted after just your first hour. But it's a great feeling because you build great stamina, you make friends, and you meet lots of cool people. And hey, talk about advice in clubs, you can meet chicks in MMA as well. It just... When it comes to meeting women at a gym, you can meet women at a gym and ask them out on a date and so on, but just be very casual about it. Don't act like Pepe the Pew. And, if she turns you down, just be casual. Just be friendly with her. That's really it. The reason why you're going to get rejected most of the time is usually not even because there's something seriously wrong with you. A lot of it could just be because she's seeing someone, or she might have just gotten out of a bad relationship. There's a million and one ways, or million and one reasons why a woman would have rejected you. So you get rejected by a woman, don't take it personally. There's a million other reasons besides it just being you. But anyways, any advice? On joining a gym? I would, in general, Do cardio outside of your regular MMA sessions so that you can build stamina. Join a good gym with a good instructor. That's not too expensive. I go to an expensive gym just because it's the only show in town. And best martial arts to pick up to start is boxing and jiu-jitsu or wrestling. If you learn just regular boxing and learn how to roll mat doing jiu-jitsu, you'll be a unit. You'll be pretty solid. Somehow I attracted a girl just by simply walking around while waiting outside an exam room. Too bad she lived abroad. Well, dude, you should have got her number and her information, dude. You guys could have been pen pals, and a year later, once you put some money away for a plane ticket, could have flew over to wherever the hell she's at, and bada boom, bada bang, good time. Let's see. Yes, MGTOW and the Alpha Sigma male is very toxic, dude. I swear to God, next person in my goddamn server that starts making Sigma jokes is gonna get gulagged. Everyone's like, oh, Sigma energy, Sigma this, Sigma that. I'm like, it's not even funny. Like, seriously. Like, cut the Sigma shit. It's not even a funny meme. Muay Thai is the shit though when you get into it. Yeah, and it's also extremely brutal. Very brutal martial art. Yep, for sure. Hello. Do lots of stretching and eat healthy, avoid nicotine. Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Definitely quit any and all drug habits or alcohol habits when you get into MMA. And oddly enough, MMA will actually help you quit drug and alcohol habits. Also, for many, the uncertainty is just too big. You never want to be the one-nighter object. Yeah, pretty much. Like, women don't like the feeling of being used and loosed or pumped and dumped. They actually want to, because remember when I mentioned earlier, sex is a massive investment for them? Well, yeah, they don't want to just feel like they're being pumped and dumped, Women generally want relationships. I mean, some women don't mind pump and dump. There are some women that, are just in it for the sex. I mean, yeah, there are women that are nymphomaniacs that'll string along multiple guys at a time and have multiple sexual partners. There are women that aren't. There are women that are just huge attention whores and they'll just waste your time, like leading you on. Oh yeah, there's plenty of girls that do that, and it's not that common, but it's pretty common, and it is very fucking irritating. Girls that are just fishing for compliments because they're not sure of themselves. Sigma. Someone who's supposedly an alpha, but they're an incel, like someone who's conventionally attractive or they're a lone wolf or so on. I don't fucking know. It's a dumb meme. MGTOW means men going their own way. Men going their own way. They are men who have genuine grievances and concerns for the divorce court. I'm standing up because I'm about to kill the stream. Last question, because I'm about to hit the gym, but men going their own way are, I'm going to step back a bit. They are men who have genuine grievances with society and dating in general. They typically have a lot of conservative stances and viewpoints, but they do have some genuine grievances and concerns with respect to the divorce court and how badly men get fucked whenever there's a divorce, because, you can get raked if you're a mid-income or a high-income man with a good-paying job. You can get raked over the coals via alimony and child support. Many women have hosed men, and not only that, but like people do tend to downplay or underestimate how much like the legal system favors women over men. Like, let's say a woman's coming after me with a knife, right? Woman's, slicing and dicing, even though I get a cut that requires 100 stitches, I would be the one who ends up going to jail over it or facing time out of self-defense if I say we're to like beat the shit out of her, basically. So that's kind of like the situation with the legal system. The legal system, if there's a woman involved and whether or not she's a victim, the court is going to be slanted in her favor just because she's a woman. Also, there's like a bunch of different forms of contraception developed for women, but there's like nothing for men besides the condom. Divorce court is slanted in women's favor. generally people on average have a much more positive disposition towards you and find you to be much more presentable if you're a woman. So they do have genuine points. These are all true things. It's just their solution. Well, their solution mainly involves protesting, basically going their own way, like whatever that means. So they have genuine concerns. They just withdraw from the dating game and they just use women for sex and that's it, which is kind of a toxic and shitty thing to do, but that's what they feel like is the best course of action. The only winning move is not to play because it's no longer worth it for men to get married or whatever. So you have those types of men who've been either fucked over or see how men get fucked over by the legal system. And then you have men that are basically sent their own way by women that they've had negative or toxic interactions with that slants their opinion against women, or they're not physically attractive, so they aren't lucky with women. And when they do finally get lucky, she just ends up using him and losing him. Like that sort of shit happens. So you have men going their own way, and then you have men who were sent their own way by women, which are surprisingly more of them than you think. So I don't know. Like I said, Manosphere has genuine grievances, and they're things that I think we as leftists should hear from and hear out and provide solutions to. Because if we don't, reactionaries are going to come along and provide solutions of their own, which almost irrevocably involve making life for everyone on Earth, making life for everyone on Earth much more miserable if you are not a straight, white, cisgendered, heterosexual, red-blooded male. Anyways, Manosphere are super unhinged. Yeah, I'm just acknowledging that they have good points. All right, guys. Yeah, exactly. That's the takeaway. They want to basically, many of them want to go back to patriarchy. They want women to be in the home while they be breadwinners, even though that was a shitty dynamic too. Okay, so let me get this straight. You're brutalized and exploited by the capitalist system. So in return, your reward for tolerating this shitty system is you get to brutalize and chastise and exploit your wife back at home. You know, fuck that noise. Also, you're not closing Pandora's box on women's rights. That's another thing. You're not going back to the 40s or 50s. So like the Abby Shapiros of the world and the Lauren Southerns who want to sit here and fucking moralize about how women need to be virtuous and be submissive, passive partners who, get back in the kitchen and make the men them sandwiches while the men go out and fucking go win the bread, right? But first off, they don't even adhere to their own moral code or the virtues that they love to signal. And because Lauren Southern's dating a mixed race man, and Abby Shapiro does one night flings, just dating multiple dudes. So they don't even follow their own. They don't even follow their own standards. They don't live up to their own standards. And two, you're not rolling the clocks back on women's rights. All right, it's not going to happen. Women's rights are here to stay, and we should be happy that they're here to stay. But anyways,